Today's math lesson is 12-2, using money to understand decimals and decimal place value. Today we'll be able to use place value charts and money to read and write decimals to the tenths and hundredths in standard word and expanded form. We can use money to think about decimals and fractions, which both represent a part of or less than a whole. Remember that we count money in dollars and cents. Cents are part of a dollar. 100 cents is equivalent to one whole dollar. And so that means that anytime we have a cent amount that's less than a dollar, we can think about it in terms of a decimal or a fraction. We can use decimal place value to think about dollar place value to think about decimal place value. Remember that place value gets 10 times greater as you move to the left. Place value gets 10 times less as you move to the right. Remember, that's our 10 times greater rule that we've been working with since the beginning of the year. Okay. We're going to do example 1 in just a minute. We're going to look at notes 3 and 4 first. So 10 dimes equal 100 cents, or $1. So that means that 1 dime is one of 10 equal parts of a dollar. So that means that a dime is equal to 1/10 of a dollar. Because if I count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, that's equal to one whole dollar. And so that means that each dime is equal to 1/10 of a dollar. So you don't have to label each individual dime like I'm doing, but I just want you to understand that. So a dime is really 1/10 or a fraction of a whole dollar. So remember, as a fraction, we write 1/10 as 1 over 10. Remember, as a decimal, we write it as 0 is in the ones place, dot for our decimal, and then we put a 1 in the tenths place. Okay? So for example 1, if I have $0 and 50 cents, that's how I'd read that as a money amount. So that would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dimes, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 cents. So I can put that into a place value chart by putting a 0 in the ones place. That's my whole dollar amount, then my decimal point. My 5 is going to go in the tenths place, and then my 0 is going to go in the hundredths place. And so the way that I would read this as a decimal is 0 and 50 hundredths, since it goes up to the hundredths. I'm going to read the whole 50 and then the hundredths. In terms of thinking about dimes, because a dime is one of 10 equal parts of a dollar, that means that 5 dimes is equal to 5/10. And so what we're going to start thinking about in this lesson, we're going to continue, is equivalent tenths and hundredths. So because 5 dimes is 5/10 of a dollar, and 5 dimes is also equivalent to 50 hundredths of a dollar, that means that 5/10 is also equivalent to 50 hundredths. Example 2, so we'll look at that in just a second. We're going to look through pennies first. So 100 pennies equal 100 cents, or one whole dollar. So that means that 1 penny is 1 out of 100 equal parts of a dollar. This means that a penny is 1/100th of a dollar. So remember, we talked about tenths and hundredths. So 1/100th is written, so that means that each penny, and once again, don't write this, but each penny is equal to 1/100th of a dollar. So remember, as a fraction, we write 1/100th as 1 over 100. As a decimal, we've got our 0 in our ones place. We put a 0 in the tenths place because we've only got 1 penny, so that's not a full tenth. And then we put our 1 in the hundredths place. So 10, we'll look at note number 10 and note number 7 in just a second. So go back up to example 2. So we'd read this as $0.04. So to turn that into a decimal amount, we're going to plug that 0 into the ones place, then our decimal point, plug the 0 into the tenths place, and then plug the 4 into the hundredths place. So as a decimal amount, we would read that as 0 and 4 hundredths. So 10 pennies equal 10 cents. And so what we see here is if I had 10 of these pennies, that would be equal to 10 cents, which is equal to 1 dime. So like I mentioned before, what we start getting at is the understanding that 10 hundredths is going to be equal to 1/10. So like we looked at before with that 0 and 50 hundredths, it takes 50 hundredths to equal those 5/10. So 10 hundredths takes a full column to equal that 1/10. Example 3 says Juan is competing in a game show. Every time he answers a question correctly, a bulb lights up. He answered 100 questions, and the bulb lit up 83 times. How could you describe Juan's score? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shade this in our decimal model. So remember, we've got 100 total spaces, and so we need to shade 83. So remember, that's going to be 8 full columns, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then 3 extra hundredths from that 9th column. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to write that as a fraction. So remember, 83 is the part, 100 is the total, so that's 83 over 100, or 83 hundredths. Okay, as a decimal amount, we don't have a whole, so we're going to put a 0 in the ones place, then our decimal point. We have 8 full columns, so that's going to be 8 in the tenths place, and then a 3 in the hundredths place, the 3 extra parts. So we would read that as a decimal as 0 and 83 hundredths. Okay, so you're staying on the same example, so we're still going to be on example 3, but so you're staying in the same box. I just couldn't fit it on one slide, so I moved the slide, but you're just going to stay in the same box. So now we're going to look at how we can write decimals in both expanded form and word form. Very similar to how do we do regular numbers. So in expanded forms, we have 0 ones, we have 8 tenths, and we have 3 hundredths. So in expanded form, we would write this as 0 plus, and then we would write our 0 and 8 tenths plus 0 and 3 hundredths. Okay? We could also think about it as just being 0 ones plus 83 total hundredths. So both ways would be correct. We could break into tenths and hundredths, or we can keep those hundredths all the same. Okay, in word form, remember we would read this as 0 and 83 hundredths. So that's just what we write out. And remember that we could also just say 83 hundredths, and that would still be considered correct. Okay, example 4 says 63 cents, or $0.63. So if we put that in the place value chart, we're going to put a 0 in the ones place, decimal point, and then our 6 and our 3. So we would read that as 0 and 63 hundredths, or just 63 hundredths. So we could think about it as $0 plus 6 dimes plus 3 pennies, which would be equivalent to 0 ones plus 6 tenths plus 3 hundredths. We could also think about it as 0 ones plus the total 63 hundredths. So that would be our expanded form. Okay? And then for our word form, we would say 0 and 63 hundredths. Remember that we could also just say 63 hundredths. So remember that we've got to include the TH. It's not hundreds, it's hundredths. Just like it's not tens, it's tenths. Okay. Example 5, last one, $6.52. So in this case, we see that we actually have a digit that's going to go in the ones place other than 0. We've got 6 ones. So we've got 6 wholes and our 5 in our tenths place, 2 in our hundredths place. So we would read that as 6 and 52 hundredths. So $6, that would be 5 dimes and 2 pennies. 6 ones, 5 tenths, 2 hundredths. We could also think about it as 6 ones and 52 total hundredths. 6 and 52 hundredths is how we would write that in word form.